I work night shift at a rural post office, and I can't blink after midnight. Have you ever been handed a piece of paper that felt heavier than lead, like it carried the weight of your own doom? Or been told to follow rules so bizarre, so downright bone-chilling that you started questioning whether you were awake or trapped in some fevered nightmare? I have. And I swear on everything I hold dear, I wish I never had. My name's Tommy. A plain, forgettable man in a plain, forgettable life. 38 years on this earth and nothing much to show for it except a mailman's uniform, a pair of scuffed boots, and the silence that comes from being single in a small town. No kids. No wife. No wild stories to tell, or at least, not until that night. See, I worked the graveyard shift at a creaky little post office in Mill Creek. A place so small even the stray dogs know everyone's business. Population hovers at 2,000 on a good day if you count the drifters and the dearly departed resting up on the hill. It's the kind of town where nothing happens. At least, nothing that folks are willing to talk about. But let me tell you, there was one night that cracked open the quiet like a coffin lid. The night I learned the rules weren't just some oddball tradition. They were a lifeline. A set of commandments carved out to keep death and worse at bay. It all began at exactly 10:03 p.m. on a Thursday evening that smelled of rain and regret. I remember the time clear as day because I was punching in at the old brass clock on the wall, the one that ticks too loud in the silence. That's when Marvin, old Marvin, who'd manned that shift longer than I've been alive, handed me an envelope so yellowed and brittle it looked like it might crumble to dust right there in my hand. His face? I'll never forget it. Pale as chalk. Eyes hollow like he'd already seen what was coming for me. You sure you want to take over the night shift, son? His voice cracked like dry timber. I tried to muster a smile, though my gut twisted up like barbed wire. Yeah, I said, forcing the words out. I like the quiet. But Marvin didn't smile back. Not even a flicker of one. Instead, with hands that trembled just enough for me to notice, he pressed the envelope into my palm. Then you'd best read this. Every last word. And don't you dare cut corners, boy. Not a single one. The envelope felt cold, somehow like it had been waiting in a grave. I opened it, heart thudding in my chest like a drum at a funeral. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed and cracked at the edges. The list was typed in all caps, the ink faded but legible. And what it said, well, it read more like a survival manual than anything to do with mail. Rules for the night shift, Mill Creek Postal Station. Clock in exactly at 10:03 p.m. Not a minute earlier. Not a minute later. Lock the front door behind you. Check it twice. At 11:11 p.m., place a glass of milk on the front counter. Do not drink it. The red mailbox outside is for them. Do not touch it. If you hear scratching from P.O. Box 121, ignore it. Do not open it. Between 12 a.m. and 12:15 a.m., do not blink for more than 3 seconds. At 1 a.m., you'll hear a knock at the back door. Do not open it. If a letter arrives addressed to someone who doesn't exist, burn it. Lights will flicker at 2:22 a.m. That's normal. Don't panic. Never, ever fall asleep. I read the list twice, maybe 3 times, each word sinking into my brain like ice water down my spine. I looked up, expecting Marvin to crack a grin, tell me it was a joke, some kind of twisted welcome to the night shift. But there was no grin. No laughter. Just that haunted look as he stepped backward like I was already lost to him. This some kind of hazing? I asked, though my voice wavered, betraying me. No joke, Marvin said, voice low and hollow as a grave. You follow the rules or you don't make it to sunrise. A nervous chuckle escaped my throat, but it sounded wrong. Hollow. Like it didn't belong in that room. Marvin didn't join in. He just turned on his heel and walked out, the door closing behind him with a finality that sounded too much like the slamming of a casket lid. I watched him disappear into the night, not once looking back. And just like that, I was alone. Alone with the list. Alone with the silence that suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. For a long moment, I stood there, heart hammering, eyes on the paper, mind screaming at me to walk away. But rent was due. Bills don't pay themselves. And besides, how bad could it really be? So I folded the list with trembling hands, shoved it into my jacket pocket, and took my first steps into the nightmare I never saw coming. But tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed? Would you have followed the rules? Or would you have walked out and risked whatever was waiting out there in the dark? Because what came next? What came after the clock ticked past 10:03 p.m.? That's where the real terror began. The first thing I did, my hands trembling ever so slightly as the weight of the night began to settle on me, was lock the front door. Not once, but twice, just like the list demanded. The old brass lock clicked into place with a finality that made the silence of the post office feel heavier, as if the building itself exhaled its last breath and left me to fend off the dark alone. For a stretch of time, nothing out of the ordinary stirred. I busied myself with the dull routine, trying to convince myself that this was all some elaborate prank or maybe an overactive imagination fed by too many sleepless nights. I sorted mail with mechanical precision, stacked a few battered packages with care, and tried to drown out the creeping anxiety with sips of bitter coffee that scalded my tongue. The radio crackled in the background, offering nothing but static and the occasional ghost of a melody, as if the airwaves themselves were too afraid to speak. But time, relentless as ever, dragged its feet toward the next rule. And soon enough, 11:11 p.m. came calling. It nearly slipped my mind, the milk. My throat constricted as I swallowed hard, cursing myself for almost forgetting such a simple task. I rummaged through the break room fridge, fingers brushing past old sandwiches and forgotten cans until I found it, a small carton of milk, cold and sweating in my grip. I placed it on the front counter exactly as the instructions said, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. At first, the world remained still. No thunderclap, no unearthly wail. Just the hum of the flickering lights above and the soft tick of the wall clock, each second feeling heavier than the last. But then, out of the corner of my eye, something shifted. My skin prickled with that unmistakable sense of being watched. I turned my head, slow as molasses, and there it was, a shadow. A figure, tall and still, standing just beyond the front window, its outline warped by the dirty glass. I blinked once, heart caught in my throat, and when my eyes opened again, the figure had vanished. Like smoke in the wind. That was the first time my blood ran cold, icy tendrils creeping through my veins. I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light. My mind playing games. But deep down, a gnawing dread began to take root. And it wouldn't let go. Minutes bled into each other, the silence stretching so thin it felt like it might snap. And then, at precisely 11:40 p.m., I heard it. A scratching. Faint at first, like the scuttle of a mouse searching for crumbs. But it grew louder, sharper, claws against metal, deliberate and desperate. The sound came from P.O. Box 121. Every hair on my neck stood on end as I forced my legs to move, each step heavier than the last. The box trembled, rattling as though whatever lay inside was trying to claw its way out. My pulse thundered in my ears as I stared at it, mesmerized by the violent shaking. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket for the key, my fingers brushing the cold metal. But then Rule 5 screamed at me from the recesses of my mind. Do not open it. The words blazed in my thoughts, as loud as any siren. My hand recoiled as if the key itself had burned me. I stumbled back, breath ragged, watching the box convulse for what felt like forever. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the scratching stopped. Silence fell, thick and absolute. The kind of silence that makes you feel like even your heartbeat is too loud. It was in that moment I realized this wasn't some game. The rules weren't superstition. They were my only shield against something I couldn't begin to understand. I clenched my fists, whispering to myself, no, I can't risk breaking them. Not now. Not ever. Midnight arrived like the tolling of a funeral bell, and with it came the most maddening rule of all. No blinking for more than 3 seconds. My throat tightened as I set a timer on my watch, the glow of the numbers feeling like the only light left in a world that had turned alien. I fixed my gaze on the clock, counting every blink, feeling my eyes dry and burn as the minutes crawled by. 7 minutes in, and it felt like my eyelids weighed a ton, my vision blurring at the edges. But I held on, teeth clenched, refusing to let the rules slip through my fingers. Until 12:08 a.m. That's when it happened. Just a second, 1 second too long. My eyes shut and sweet relief flooded through me. But when I opened them again, the relief turned to ice. There, behind the counter, stood a man. Or what was left of one. His uniform, once blue, was torn and stained, hanging off his frame like a shroud. And his face, God help me, his face. It was as if someone had tried to piece together a human face from memory alone and failed. Features misplaced, proportions all wrong. A mockery of a man. You're not Marvin, he rasped, his voice like gravel dragged across concrete, carried on a wind that smelled of dust and decay. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. My tongue felt thick, useless in my mouth. The figure leaned in closer, empty eye sockets boring into mine. You blinked, he said. Not a question. A statement. A sentence. And then, just like that, he was gone. As if the air had swallowed him whole. And that, my friend, was only the beginning. Because the night was far from over. And I had miles to go before I saw the sun. So tell me, would you have blinked? Or would you have stared into the darkness and risked what stared back? I hit the floor like a marionette whose strings had been cut, the breath knocked clean out of me. My hands scraped against the cold, gritty tiles as I scrambled, half crawling, half stumbling, toward the only place that felt like it could shelter me from whatever had just stood behind that counter. The supply closet. I slipped inside, pulling the door shut so hard it rattled on its hinges and collapsed against the wall, heart hammering like a drum in a funeral march. The air in that tiny space was stale, thick with the scent of bleach and dust, but I didn't care. I pressed my back against the shelves, drawing my knees up to my chest, and stared at the thin sliver of light beneath the door, praying nothing would darken it. The seconds dragged on like hours. My breath came in shallow, ragged bursts, each one louder than it had any right to be. I kept my eyes on my watch. Tick, tick, tick. The minutes crawled forward until finally, blessedly, the clock hit 12:15. I forced myself to stand, legs trembling like a newborn fawn's. When I stepped back into the main room, the world seemed ordinary again. The air was still. The clock ticked on. No sign of the man with the broken face. No shadows. No whispers. But my heart wouldn't let me forget that something had been here, breathing the same air, watching me. And the night wasn't done with me yet. 1 a.m. crept up like a storm cloud on the horizon. I barely had time to brace myself before it began, the knock. Exactly as the rules foretold. One. Then another. Then a third. Each one louder than the last, reverberating through the building, rattling my bones. I clenched my jaw, held my breath, frozen like a deer in headlights. And then came the voice. "Tommy, let me in, baby. It's cold. Please." My blood ran to ice. That voice? That sweet, familiar voice? My sister's voice? But that couldn't be. Couldn't possibly be. My sister had been dead 6 years. Buried under a headstone I visited every Christmas. I backed away from the door so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. Hands clamped over my ears, I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to block out the sound, but the voice seeped in, soft at first, then desperate. The knocking grew violent, though it groaning beneath the blows. And just when I thought I couldn't bear it another second, it stopped. I crumpled to my knees, the weight of it all crushing down on me, and gagged on the bile rising in my throat. I nearly lost what little was in my stomach. My whole body trembled like a leaf caught in a storm. The next hour crawled by in torturous silence. Every creak of the building, every groan of the pipes, every whisper of wind outside sent my nerves skittering. I started to hum, a broken, tuneless hum, just to drown out the quiet. Just to remind myself I was still here. Still human. And then came 2:22 a.m. The lights flickered just as the list had promised. A stutter of brightness, a breath of darkness. I clenched my fists and whispered, "That's normal. That's normal." But my voice didn't even convince me. When the lights steadied, my eyes darted to the front counter. And that's when I saw it. The milk was gone. My stomach dropped like a stone into a bottomless well. I hadn't touched it. No one had come through that door. Or so I thought. Something had. Driven by equal parts fear and foolishness, I turned toward the red mailbox outside. Rule 4 blared in my mind like a siren, do not touch it. But I had to see. I had to know. The night had already twisted beyond anything I could have imagined. My boots crunched across the gravel as I stepped out into the cold, my breath visible in the frigid air. The red box stood there, mouth hanging open like it had just spoken some terrible truth. I peered inside, heart in my throat. Empty. Just a hollow space where something had once been, or worse, where something had reached in. And before I could stop myself, before I could think, I slammed it shut with a bang that echoed through the night and sprinted back inside, lungs burning, blood roaring in my ears. I leaned against the door, gasping for air, realizing too late what I had done. I'd broken a rule. And in a place like this, mistakes don't go unpunished. At 3:03 a.m. sharp, when the world feels thinnest, like the skin between life and death is stretched to breaking, a sound sliced through the silence. A soft, almost polite shuffle against the floorboards. I froze, breath hitched as a letter slid under the front door. Just like that. Like it had been handed over by unseen fingers that waited on the other side. I stared at it for what felt like forever. My hands trembled as I bent down to pick it up, fingertips brushing the yellowed paper. No stamp. No return address. Just a single line scrawled in a crooked hand across the front. To the man who shouldn't be here. The words seemed to pulse on the page. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat refusing to budge. Against every instinct screaming in my bones, I tore it open. Inside, a single sentence stared back at me, stark and cold. You broke Rule 6. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My ears rang. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out every other sound. I remembered Rule 8, burn it. Burn it now. My body moved before my mind caught up. I stumbled toward the break room, clutching the letter like it might bite me. The microwave. That was all I could think of. I stuffed the paper inside, slammed the door, and hit start. The machine hummed, the letter sparking and curling as the flames took it. Acrid smoke filled the room. The fire alarm wailed, piercing the night like a banshee's cry. But I didn't care. Let it burn. Let the whole building burn if it meant ending this nightmare. Seconds passed like lifetimes. I stood there, sweating, heart galloping in my chest, waiting for something, anything to change. But the night held its breath. And then, at 3:30 a.m., I saw him. Marvin. Or what was left of him. His face, pale and ghostly, appeared at the window. Eyes wide, unblinking, staring straight at me. But Marvin was gone. He had left hours ago, hadn't he? Hadn't he? I stepped closer, unable to stop myself, drawn like a moth to a flame. The figure at the window didn't blink. Didn't move. Just stared. Stared too long. Too still. Too wrong. My skin crawled. My gut twisted. I killed the lights, plunging the room into darkness, as if hiding would protect me from whatever that thing was. I sank into the shadows, heart pounding so loud I was sure it could hear me. Time stretched, warped. Every tick of the clock felt like it might be my last. And then came 4:44 a.m. A phone rang. My blood turned cold. There was no phone at the front desk. Not that I'd ever seen. And yet, there it was. A battered, black rotary phone sitting there like it had always belonged. The shrill ring cut through the quiet, echoing off the walls. My hand shook as I reached for it, sweat slicking my palm. I lifted the receiver, pressing it to my ear with a dread I can't put into words. A voice dry as autumn leaves, soft as a death rattle, whispered through the line. For more rules. Follow them if you want to see the sun. Then, nothing. Just the hollow hiss of dead air. I stood there, frozen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, the words replaying in my mind. For more rules? How could that be? The list was supposed to be complete. I turned in a slow circle, searching for some new list, some fresh instructions. But the room offered nothing. No paper. No writing on the walls. No voice guiding me. I was on my own. 5 a.m. crept in, the darkest hour before dawn. And that's when I did the only thing left. I made my own rules. With trembling hands, I scrawled them onto the back of an old delivery slip, each word etched in desperation. Trust your gut. It's the only thing that hasn't lied. Stay in the light. The shadows aren't empty. Never believe the voices. No matter how sweet they sound. When in doubt, run. And don't look back. I sank into the chair, the wrench cold and heavy in my grip, knuckles white as bone. My eyes locked on the door, waiting, watching, counting each second like it might be my last. The night wasn't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. And now, the question I have for you, if the rules kept changing, if the night kept stacking the deck against you, would you stay and fight? Or would you run into the dark, not knowing what waited for you? The sun was so close. But so was everything else. At exactly 6 a.m., as if the universe itself decided my time was up, the front door unlocked with a soft, deliberate click. I didn't touch it. Didn't move a muscle toward it. It simply swung open on its own, the hinges groaning like a tired spirit set free. And with it came the dawn. Pale sunlight spilled across the threshold, chasing back the shadows that had kept me prisoner through that cursed night. I stood there for a moment, too stunned to breathe, watching the light crawl across the floor like salvation. And then, like a man stumbling out of the wreckage of a battlefield, I crossed that threshold, boots heavy, body numb. The cool morning air hit my face and I gulped it down like a man starved for oxygen. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The nightmare was over. Or so I thought. Later that morning, after what felt like both an eternity and a blink, I picked up the phone with shaking hands. My mind raced as I dialed the district office, determined to quit, to put this whole godforsaken ordeal behind me. A woman answered, voice brisk and businesslike. Mill Creek Post Office, I began, the words catching in my throat. I'm calling to resign. From the night shift. A pause. Then confusion, plain as day, bled through the line. Sir, what office did you say? Mill Creek. Yes. Mill Creek. Another pause, this one longer, heavier. Sir, the Mill Creek office was shut down. It burned in a fire back in '98. There's nothing left there. Hasn't been for over 2 decades. Nobody works there. Her words echoed in my head like a funeral bell. I didn't argue. Didn't ask questions. I simply hung up, the receiver slipping from my grasp, hitting the floor with a hollow clatter that seemed to reverberate through my very soul. I sat there in silence, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of something I couldn't name pressing down on me. I still have the list, the original list, yellowed, creased, its edges brittle as ash. I kept it, though God knows why. Maybe as a warning. Maybe as a curse. As for Marvin? Gone. Vanished like smoke. No one in town remembers him. Not a soul. It's as if he never existed at all. As if he was just another phantom conjured by that place. But here's the part that keeps me up at night, the part that lets me know this isn't over, not by a long shot. Every Thursday night, without fail, at 10:03 p.m., I find a letter waiting on my porch. No stamp. No return address. No footsteps leading to it. Just the letter. Every time. It says the same thing, week after week, in that same crooked, haunting scrawl. Ready for another shift? I don't answer. I don't touch it. But the truth? The truth is, I know one night I'll have no choice. One night, the rules will come calling again. And next time, I might not be so lucky. So tell me, when the rules come for you, will you be ready? Or will you blink, will you hesitate, and let the night swallow you whole?